The rain that lasted 2 million years. How a megastorm created the age of dinosaurs. Chapter 1. The Parched Kingdom. Long before the thundering footsteps of the Tyrannosaurus, Rex shook the ground, and eons before the first bird took flight into the azure sky. The Earth was a world of silence and heat. This was the Triassic Period, roughly 233 million years ago. If you were to stand upon the surface of the planet during this time, you would not recognize your home. There were no 7 continents, separated by vast oceans as we know them today. Instead, there was only Pangea. The supercontinent stretched from pole to pole, a colossal landmass shaped like a jagged crescent moon. Because of its immense size, the moisture from the surrounding Panthalassic Ocean could not penetrate deep into the inland regions. The heart of Pangea was a desolate, unforgiving place. It was a world of endless red deserts, where the sun beat down with a ferocity that baked the soil into cracked, dusty mosaics. The air was dry, shimmering with heat haze, and the smell of sulfur and dust hung heavy in the atmosphere. Life, however, is stubborn. In this arid hellscape, creatures had evolved to survive the drought. The masters of this dry world were not the dinosaurs, though they existed as small, skittish shadows in the undergrowth. The rulers were the crocodilian line archosaurs and the stocky, beak-faced rhynchosaurs. These animals were built for the heat. Their metabolism slow, their skins thick to retain moisture. They feasted on the tough seed ferns and drought-resistant flora that clung to life in the ephemeral oases. They were the kings of the wasteland, and they had reigned for millions of years. They believed, in their primitive instincts, that the sun would always shine, that the dry winds would always blow, and that the world would remain a furnace forever. But the earth is restless. Deep beneath the crust, far below the feet of the unsuspecting rhynchosaurs, a pressure was building. A geological time bomb was ticking down, ready to unleash a force that would shatter the silence of the Triassic deserts. Chapter 2. The Fire Before the Flood. The catalyst for the change did not come from the sky, but from the depths. On the western coast of Pangea, in a region that would one day drift apart to become the Wrangellia terrain of modern-day Alaska and British Columbia, the crust began to fracture. It started with a tremor, a low-frequency vibration that rippled through the bedrock. Then the ground tore open. Massive flood basalts erupted. This was not a single volcano blowing its top. It was a bleeding wound in the Earth's surface. Lava poured out in quantities that the human mind struggles to comprehend, covering millions of square kilometers. But the lava was not the true killer. The true agent of change was invisible. As the magma surged upward, it burned through immense deposits of limestone and ancient organic matter buried in the crust. This combustion injected gigatons of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The sky turned a bruised purple, choked with ash and gas. The greenhouse effect took hold with terrifying speed. The global temperature, already hot, spiked feverishly. The oceans warmed, and as they did, the water cycle accelerated into overdrive. Warm air holds more moisture than cold air. The atmosphere became a sponge, soaking up the water from the steaming oceans until it could hold no more. The clouds gathered, dark and heavy, stacking mile upon mile into the stratosphere. They blocked out the harsh Triassic sun, casting a long shadow over the red deserts of Pangea. The winds changed direction, carrying these moisture-laden behemoths deep inland, into the heart of the dry continent. And then, the first drop fell. Chapter 3. The rain that never stopped it began as a drizzle, fizzing as it hit the hot rocks. Then it became a steady shower, Finally, it transformed into a torrential downpour. In the beginning, the animals of the desert might have welcomed the water. It was a respite from the scorching heat. But the rain did not stop. It rained for days, then weeks, then years. The dry, compacted soil of the desert could not absorb the deluge. Flash floods of biblical proportions roared through the canyons, scouring the landscape. The red sands turned into churning rivers of mud. Ancient dunes were washed away, dissolved into the rising waters. The topography of Pangea began to melt. This period, known to geologists as the Carnian Pluvial Event, was not a single continuous storm in the sense of a standard rainy day. It was a humid phase, a pulse of intense rainfall that lasted for roughly 2 million years. There were pauses, brief moments where the sun might peek through. But the prevailing climate had shifted from arid to hyperhumid. The physical world changed rapidly. The erosion was catastrophic. Rocks were stripped of their minerals, and the runoff dumped massive amounts of nutrients into the oceans, causing algae blooms that suffocated marine life. On land, the transformation was even more dramatic. The red deserts vanished. In their place, a new world began to grow. Chapter 4. The Green Revolution. With water comes life, but not the life that was there before. The tough, drought-resistant plants that the rhinchosaurs and other herbivores relied on began to rot and die in the sodden ground. They were not adapted for this excess of moisture. In their place, a new kind of flora exploded across the continent. Lush, fast-growing conifers, cycads, and ferns took over. The landscape turned a vibrant, deep green. Forests sprang up where sand dunes once stood. These new trees grew tall, reaching for the gray, weeping sky. They produced resin to protect themselves from the damp and the insects, leaving behind the amber deposits we find today as evidence of this wet era. This green revolution sounded the death knell for the old rulers. The rhinchosaurs, with their specialized beaks designed to shear tough, dry vegetation, found themselves starving in a world of plenty. They could not digest the new, lush plant life. Their populations crashed. The large, lumbering Rauisuchians, the apex predators of the dry world, found their hunting grounds turned into swamps. They were heavy, adapted for firm ground, and now they floundered in the mud, unable to catch their prey. The ecosystem was collapsing. It was a mass extinction event, silent and slow, washing away the old guard with every falling raindrop. Chapter 5. The Rise of the Underdogs. But in every crisis, there is opportunity. While the giants of the Triassic were dying, a small, obscure group of reptiles was watching from the shadows. They were the early dinosaurs. Until the rain came, dinosaurs were minor players on the evolutionary stage. They were small, no bigger than a dog or pony, bipedal and agile. They had evolved in the harsh margins of the world, and they possessed a unique set of biological tools that would suddenly become their greatest assets. Firstly, they were upright. Their legs were positioned directly under their bodies, unlike the sprawling limbs of the lizards and crocodiles. This gave them agility and stamina. In the thick, muddy undergrowth of the new rainforests, the sprawling creatures got stuck, dragging their bellies in the mire. The dinosaurs, however, could step over the roots and run through the sludge with ease. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, the dinosaurs had a superior respiratory system. The bird-like lungs of early dinosaurs allowed them to extract oxygen more efficiently than their competitors. In the hot, humid, and carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere of the Carnian Pluvial Event, this was a superpower. They could run faster, hunt longer, and grow quicker. As the rhinchosaurs vanished, a vacuum appeared in the food chain. The dinosaurs stepped into the void. They adapted to eat the new flora. The long-necked sauropodomorphs began to grow larger, their necks stretching to reach the high branches of the new conifer forests. The theropods, the meat-eaters like Herrerasaurus and Eoraptor, found that their speed made them the new apex predators of the wetlands. By the time the clouds finally began to clear, 2 million years later, the hierarchy of life had been inverted. The clumsy giants of the past were gone, buried in the mud. The dinosaurs, once the underdogs, were now the undisputed masters of the earth. Chapter 6. The sun returns. Eventually, the volcanic eruptions in Wrangellia ceased. The carbon cycle slowly rebalanced. The atmosphere cooled slightly, and the relentless rains began to taper off. The sun, the true golden sun of the Triassic, broke through the thinning clouds. But it shone down on a different world. The Pangea that emerged from the mist was not the barren red desert of before. It was a world of diverse forests, river systems, and lakes. And the silence was gone. The air was filled with the calls of the new rulers. The dinosaurs had exploded in diversity and size. They had conquered every niche, from the riverbanks to the forest canopy. They had grown from frightened scavengers into the titans that would dominate the planet for the next 160 million years. The Carnian Pluvial Event had ended, but its legacy was written in bone and stone. The rain had washed away the past and watered the seeds of the future. It was a violent, damp, and chaotic rebirth. Epilogue. The echo of the rain. Today, we look back at the rock layers from the Carnian age and we see the evidence. We see the sudden shift from red sandstone to gray river sediments. We see the spike in carbon isotopes. We see the disappearance of the rhynchosaur fossils and the sudden abundance of dinosaur tracks. It is a humbling reminder of how fragile dominance can be. The rulers of the Triassic seemed invincible, perfectly adapted to their world. But the Earth is dynamic. A shift in the wind, a burst of magma, a rain that refuses to stop, that is all it takes to end one era and begin another. We often think of the asteroid as the event that defined the dinosaurs, the fiery cataclysm that ended their reign. But we rarely speak of the water that began it. Without that 2 million year storm, without the mud and the flood, the dinosaurs might have remained small, insignificant shadows in a world of crocodiles. So the next time you see a heavy rainstorm, when the sky turns gray and the water pours down in sheets, remember the Carnian Pluvial Event. Remember that rain is not just water. It is a force of creation and destruction. It was the rain that drowned the old world, and in doing so, christened the Age of Dinosaurs.